Here is the top 10. Alabama looks like they are going to edge out Georgia with, again, a number 1 class. That's what Nick Saban has done basically since he got to Alabama. Signed number 1 rated recruiting classes. Georgia is going to finish, it appears, in the 24/7 composite class, 2nd place. 3rd place, and this is the biggest surprise so far, Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher is on a big-time hot streak. This is his first full recruiting class as the head coach of Texas A&M. And if you aren't buying into the fact that the Aggies are putting together a different caliber of athlete and a different caliber of team than they've ever had before, you haven't been paying attention. This is a tremendous class that A&M has put together. They are right now the number 3 overall recruiting class in America, and we've never seen this before. In the 4 spot is LSU. We've never seen one class dominate like this, one conference dominate like this at the top of a class. The top 4 classes in the country are all in the SEC: Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, and LSU. It's unheard of. This is the most dominant collection of player talent that has ever been put together in the Southeastern Conference at the top of the draft. And yeah, I said draft. This is kind of like a draft. It's kind of like signing day. It's kind of like Christmas morning. Best team outside of the SEC so far. Give props to Mario Cristobal for what he has done at Oregon. The Ducks have put together an incredible class that looks to be an elite level gathering of talent, particularly in relation to everybody else that is being recruited against in the Pac-12. USC is putting together one of its worst classes ever. Most dominant recruiting class in the history of the SEC. Clemson sliding in at number 6. Best class in the ACC. Best class so far in the Big Ten. Michigan is in the 7 spot. Then you've got Oklahoma. I do think Lincoln Riley. A lot of people say, what's the difference between Lincoln Riley and Bob Stoops? Certainly the offense is a lot different, but I think Lincoln Riley has aggressively stepped up the quality of player that Oklahoma is getting. If you compare recruiting at Oklahoma pre-Lincoln Riley to post-Lincoln Riley, the Sooners have gotten a lot more aggressive in competing for top-of-the-line level players. I don't want to say Bob Stoops was lazy, but he wasn't bringing in the same caliber of player, same caliber of athlete, same caliber of recruit so far that Lincoln Riley is. Texas is number 9. Decent class for Texas. Okay class. Tom Herman has put together a couple of good classes. Penn State sliding in at the number 10 spot, and they don't yet have a full allotment of their recruits. Their average star rating is actually really high. In fact, if you look at Penn State's average star rating, they would be number 3 behind Alabama and Georgia if you just went by the average star of their commitments. Okay, that's the top 10. So what do we learn from the top 10? 4 SEC schools, 2 Big Ten schools, 1 ACC school, I'm counting out here as we go, and Oklahoma and Texas from the Big 12. Those are the 10 best classes that are being put together in this composite class ranking so far. Now, 88% of the top 250 recruits will sign today, but the other 12% are still to come, so there could still be some movement in these class ratings. I'm going to add in that caveat because there are still a lot of big guys out there that could change things, all right? Beyond the top 10, what do we see? Florida State. I would say just an okay class for Willie Taggart. The expectation was when Willie Taggart went to FSU, this guy is going to recruit like gangbusters. I think probably jumping around to as many different schools, South Florida to Oregon to FSU, hurt him a little bit here this year. I think also the fact that Florida State was not very good on the field hurt him. I would say if you've been buying stock in all the top recruits as coaches, as recruiters, that he would have been higher in the expectation. Notre Dame is 12. Brian Kelly's done really well as a recruiter at Notre Dame when you consider the restrictions he has in terms of getting players into that school. One of the great untold stories. Again, I told you that Notre Dame has 2 top 10 classes in the last 4 years. The quality of overall talent at Notre Dame has gone up. Okay? The quality of Notre Dame has gone up over the years. Auburn is sitting at 13. They only have 16 commits in right now. It's hard to know. Again, their star rating really high. You don't get rated fully until you get to at least 20 members of your class. You're competing at a disadvantage until then. So until the class fills out at 20 full numbers of players, it's hard to get a total picture so far. Ohio State also under 20 commits. There's zero doubt that Urban Meyer's departure hurt Ohio State. There's talk that Justin Fields is going to end up at Ohio State. They lost their longtime quarterback commitment based on that rumor that might happen. So Ohio State coming in at 14. Washington at 15. Florida closed decently, but still I would say for the Florida Gators in their first year under Dan Mullen, 16 has to be a little bit of a disappointment. Not that highly rated of a recruiting class. Florida hasn't recruited at an elite level since Urban Meyer left, really. I know Will Muschamp did decently, but McElwain never did that well. And 16 in the first year for Dan Mullen, I think it's just okay. Tennessee is at 17, and I follow Tennessee a little bit closer. They've got 3, 4, or 5 stars that are still to be committed is the expectation down the road. I want to give a shout out. This is actually really cool. One of Tennessee's commitments in this year's class is a kid named Jackson Lampley. He was 8 years old when I wrote Dixieland Delight, and he is in the book. He is now an offensive tackle, a 4-star recruit from MBA, big private school in Nashville. He is now signing with the University of Tennessee, which makes me feel really old. But he's in the book as an 8-year-old Vol fan. If you read Dixieland Delight, he is now 18 years old, and he is signing to play football for the University of Tennessee. Really cool story. Good kid. That's wild to think about, going from 8 years old to signing with Tennessee. Now, his dad is Brad Lampley, who was a big-time recruit for Phil Fulmer back in the day. So the bloodlines are pretty good there. But still, to write about an 8-year-old kid and then see him turn into a 4-star and be graduating from MBA and signing his papers today as a 4-star recruit is pretty cool. Mississippi State, 18 overall. I know there's a lot of optimism among State fans that maybe they could get Justin Fields to consider transferring to Mississippi State because Joe Moorhead recruited him when he was initially committed to Penn State, when Moorhead was the offensive coordinator there. Impressive class being put together by who I think is the most underrated coach in all of college football, David Shaw. David Shaw out at Stanford. It's hard to get into Stanford. I know they rejected me for law school. It's hard to get into Stanford, even if you are a football player. They get the cream of the crop. I've said this before. If I could pick any school in America for my kids to go play sports at, it would be Stanford. I think they'd get the best of both academics and business. Second, by the way, Vanderbilt. All right, I'm pretty comfortable with Vanderbilt being one of the choices too. Arkansas is at 20. South Carolina, 21. Arkansas people are really excited about that number 20 ranked class in the 24/7 composite index. They are at the 20th spot, despite the fact that they went 2-10. So that's a good collection of talent for Arkansas. South Carolina sliding in at 21. Ole Miss at 22. I want to pause here for a second. This means that of the top 22 teams in college football right now, in this recruiting class ranking, 11 of them are from the SEC. So if you are Ole Miss right now, and you're an Ole Miss fan, and you're sitting around, you're saying, hey, I feel pretty good about the class we put together. Our 28 commitments, we got a lot of talent there. They're number 22 in the nation, but they are number 11 in the SEC. Think about how wild and high level that competition is, that Ole Miss is 22 in the nation, 11 overall in the country. First class for Scott Frost, I would say it's just okay. Just okay for Nebraska to finish in the 23rd spot. Purdue impressed me. Jeff Brom getting a top 25 class is very impressive. NC State racking up a top 25 class. That is the top 25.